and welcome to the Dig Deep podcast, the podcast where we discuss a new movie every day and dig deep into complex themes and identity.
Grab your popcorn and your shovels. We're digging. My name is Sierra Gallucci.
And I'm Zach.
I'm also Zach. As always, you're in for some fun conversations.
And digging.
So tonight we will be discussing an excellent documentary called Far East, Deep South. And there are a ton of themes in this movie that we're just going to dig right into.
All right, so before we begin, here's a message from our sponsor.
Hello, random citizen. Say, what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say honeybees?
Oh, why are you in my house?
Exactly! Honey. Just like today's sponsor. Honey. Have you ever heard of Honey before?
What are you doing here?
Honey is a free browser extension that lets you find discount codes from around the internet when you shop online. Have you ever thought, man, the things online that I want to buy are just too expensive?
Sir, I need you to leave my house. I'm gonna have to call the police.
You and everyone else. That's why Honey is so great. When you go to checkout, all you need to do is click and find coupons, and Honey finds them from around the internet. See, I got 20% off this crowbar, and you'll never guess what I'm going to do with it.
Sir, please, I don't have any money. Just
And
take
if,
my wallet.
and if you want to get Honey, all you need to do is go down into the description of this podcast and go to myhoney.com/digging deep. And you can get it for free and save yourself money. What do you think of that?
Just leave us alone.
Honey, the free browser extension for coupons.
That was pretty good.
Zach, how about you introduce the film?
Which one?
Schultz.
What? Oh, yeah. Okay, that's me. So there are two Zachs on this podcast. That's important to remember. All right, so the film is called Far East, Deep South, and it was released in 2020. It was made in the USA, and basically, it's a documentary, and it follows a Chinese-American family. It's two brothers, their dad and their mom, and they're searching for their family history because they find out that their grandfather, who their dad never knew, was actually born in Mississippi. So it's about them going down and trying to find out, more about the dad's relationship and about their family tree as a whole.
And not only do they learn about their family tree, but they learn about the impact that the grandfather had in the community down in the Delta, as they called it.
Right. So, the grandfather had a huge impact in the local community. And it's a lot about, I would say the main subject of the documentary is Charles. So Charles is the dad's name, and he's this really, really sweet older guy, very withdrawn, right? He talks a lot about how, because he didn't know his dad, that affected him a lot. He talks about insecurities of how he would be as a father because he didn't have that figure in his life. He's pretty much the heart of the whole documentary. Really, really awesome dude. And it's basically just about a large part of it is about his journey and discovering his family history.
And before I get into the sons and the wife of Charles, I want to say, I think you said the grandfather was born in Mississippi, and that's not right.
Yeah.
He went to Mississippi. Just
Yes.
quick clear up.
I meant to say he died in Mississippi. His
There
grave,
you go. Yeah,
his
there you
gravestone
go.
was in
There are
Mississippi.
two very big differences between born and died.
Yeah.
It was the great-grandfather that was born in San Francisco.
Yes.
Yeah, they
And
find out
that was
towards the end,
surprising.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that one when they were in the library and they were learning about all of the family history within the U.S.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't see that coming either.
It almost felt like the brothers lied to their whole lives. Like they
Well-
thought they were the
Crazy.
first ones born here, and then they find out that their great-grandfather was born here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was an accident though, so all good, I guess.
Speaking of those two brothers, they wanted to know their roots, and they tried to get their dad to talk about, but he was kind of closed off because of some personal reasons. But as it went on, they learned more, and Charles's wife always supported all of them in their journey to find information about their family.
Yeah, they had a very strong family bond throughout the whole movie. They were
Mhm.
always together.
Yeah. It was kind of like a family road trip. It's like
It
a big
was.
part of it. It's really fun.
And the filmmaker and producer Larissa Lamb is actually married to Baldwin, one of the brothers. And she's very accomplished. She's a singer, songwriter. She has a talk show. She's a music executive, a filmmaker. And Far East Deep South actually won an award, the Mary Pickford Award for Outstanding Achievement in Filmmaking at the 2021 Coronado Island Film Festival. So it's very, very accomplished.
Yeah, I can see why. It's a really good
Mhm.
good film.
Very well done. Follows the whole family very well too.
Yeah. So getting into the themes that we're going to be discussing in this podcast, because that's what we do here, talk about fun themes, documentaries,
right
and
in.
other movies. Oh yeah. So first off, big theme is the theme of identity and its relation to ethnicity, because this family as a whole, every generation, you can see the effect that being Chinese American has on them. With the sons, they talk about even that last generation where we expect, the US to have been more, okay with different ethnicities. Even they talk about the struggles they had with ethnicity. And I think, what was it? The brothers mentioned at one time that he got beat up on his first day of school, right?
Mm-hmm.
That just really hits hard. And then you go generations back and it only gets more interesting and complex and difficult for these different ethnicities in the US.
And talking on that real quick, when he was getting bullied in school, I'm pretty sure they referred to him as Japanese and told him to do karate.
Karate, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That
But
was, yeah.
It's not even his ethnicity. He's Chinese
Right.
American.
Exactly. And I think also a big part of that is, for the sons, which ethnicity, how much their ethnicity really affects their personality. Because I think they really felt like they were American first and then Chinese, right? And the Chinese was a very small part of their identity, because they were American. They liked basketball, they liked the music, they liked all this stuff, and they felt kind of disconnected from their Chinese ethnicity, their Chinese identity.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to another theme that's very prevalent is the theme of family history. So, the whole trip is kind of centered around them searching out their father and more about their family roots. And I think a really cool part to the whole film is that every time they discover something about their extended family, they get really excited. You know what I mean? You can see
There's
the
a
joy
lot
on
of
their faces.
emotion.
Yeah, and you can just see how much they're really loving this. So
Mhm.
I really think that's cool.
Mhm.
And then
yeah. No, go
there's
ahead.
also the effect of discrimination on identity, like we were mentioning before, with the kids in school bullying him for being Japanese when he's Chinese American. Obviously that plays a huge effect on people.
Right. Yeah.
And then there's also the whole idea of the Chinese people trying to get into America with the Chinese Exclusion Act, which we'll touch on later. But that was a huge problem within America at that time.
Right, and that kind of touches on the identity and ethnicity
Mhm.
aspect, because it's these first generations really had a hard time living in the U.S.
Zach Schrag, do you have anything to comment on the themes?
Not particularly, no. I mean,
Tough.
it was interesting to see them so happy to find out about family history. I know when I talk to my grandpa about stuff, it's always interesting to hear about what he did, and my father as well. But
yeah, I think
nothing much else.
I think that's something that we can all really relate to, right? Is finding out about past generations is really cool. It's because it's part of you, right? It's how you came to be. That's really neat. A question. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, Sierra.
I think it's crazy how they kept all of this information so documented, even when Chinese Americans were discriminated against back in the day. There was a building just dedicated to keeping this history alive, and that's how they found out a lot of the information about the grandfather and great-grandfather.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people too, right? They did a lot of conversations with people who actually knew the grandfather or knew his of him from their parents, So that connection is really neat. It was really neat.
And it
That's there
wasn't
too.
just the Chinese community; it was also the Black community in Mississippi at the time.
Yeah, that was a big part of the film too. So I had a question for you guys. What did you think about how not having a father affected Charles throughout his life, and how this journey kind of maybe changed him because it remedied that somewhat?
Schrag, do you want to comment on this one?
Yeah. Well, it definitely made him not have much of a childhood when he came to the US because he was working to support his grandmother at the time. He was doing school. How many? I think it was 3 jobs. He was doing a lot of work to support his grandmother. So he didn't really have a childhood or anything like that. I think figuring out his past definitely helped him open up more to his own kids. Yeah.
Yeah, in the beginning of the documentary, they opened it with like clips from their home videos from Christmas, and you could see the love in the house and the family community that they did have with each other. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, you can definitely see that despite having a father, Charles really had a lot of love in his heart still.
Oh, definitely.
I think something that stuck with me was the story he told about when he went to the church in I think where he first lived, and the pastor said, bless our Holy Father or something like that.
Heavenly Father.
Heavenly Father. And as soon as he heard Heavenly Father, he just broke into tears because he just it just brought up and related that to him, to the fact that he doesn't have a father, and he doesn't have that. He always felt like that was missing. I think that really hurt him throughout his life.
Yeah, even in the documentary, when he started talking about it, he was tearing up. Like, he's very emotional.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't shut that part out of his life. Like, he showed his emotions and he cried a lot during the interviews, and it was very touching to watch.
Yeah, and I think it's this journey that allowed him to do that. It's really cool that he was able to go on this. It opened him up, like Zach was saying.
Definitely. So then, why do you think the whole family was so excited every time they found out more information?
I think it's just a natural part of being a human is to be curious. I mean, you want to know where you come from.
Yeah, I think feeling a connection to the people who came before you too. Because like when the brothers found out that their great grandfather was actually born in San Francisco where they lived, it was like, wow, there's like this connection. Like I feel like I know that guy a little bit now.
Yeah. That was quite coincidental that they were all born in San Francisco out of like everywhere in the world.
Yeah. Such a big place, yeah.
They also talked about, was it Angel Island?
Yeah,
where they were quarantined, and the brothers always said, like, we always knew about it, but we had no idea that we had this personal connection, because that's where their grandfather came in to the US from.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think when you have a person that like was part of your family that went through that history, it makes it so much more real for you too. That's cool.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So were you expecting to find what they uncovered? Because I know I was shocked every time they found someone new or found new information.
I was shocked there were so many people around that remembered the grandfather. I mean, the Bible, the records, I'm not surprised about, because that's just something the US does. It's been like that forever. But having so many people with personal accounts and personal photos, that was more unexpected. It was cool that so many people could give testimony to how good of a man the grandfather was.
Yeah.
You know,
I think there was also.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
You know who I really liked? Happy, the older gentleman that they found that ended up giving, I think, Baldwin the photo of the grandfather. He was really cool.
Yeah. He had struggled a lot too, right? He talked about a lot of his troubles as a Chinese American.
Yes.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say that I think it's interesting that people remembered a lot. They remembered his mom because she had bound feet. And that was like 3 or 4 people mentioned like, oh yeah, she was the one who had those bound feet and she had trouble walking around. I thought that was cool. That's like how they related it. And also that kind of goes into the history because she had bound feet because that made it easier, right, for the Chinese women to get into the U.S. because it made them of a higher social standing somehow.
Yes.
It made them a higher class.
We'll touch on that
That was-
again later when we dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely we'll dig into that a little more.
Yeah, definitely. One term that I also thought was really cool was this, and Zach, tell me if I'm pronouncing this correctly, because you seem to have it before, the Junjen.
Shungun.
Shungun. Yeah, so that this search for the roots is what that means, right? And I thought that was really just a neat touch, because he said that at the very beginning of the trip, he used this phrase, and that's what they're doing, right? They're searching for their roots, for their family, for where they came from.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah.
And something important to mention was the father, Charles. He was, correct me if I'm wrong, he was born in China and then immigrated to the US.
Yeah.
But his grandfather, or his father, was already in the US when he was growing up.
Yes. Yeah.
So he was raised by a single mother.
Yeah.
Grandmother.
I think it was his mother.
Oh, in China, mother.
Yes.
Yeah. When he came to the US, it was his grandmother. Sorry.
When he came, it was the grandmother was with the grandfather. Charles's dad brought his mom.
Yeah.
It was a complicated timeline. There's a lot of because especially because in the way that it was uncovered, and you can see from their perspective how it'd be complicated too, because they found these evidences one by one and they had to tie them all together.
They gave us the information as they found it. So it was just as hectic for them as it was for us.
Right.
But it all tied together. It's still easy to follow, but it definitely does get a little lost in translation at parts.
Yeah. And I think that's good, because that, like you said, it gives us the feeling that they had, right, of this discovery, which is a cool feeling to have watching this.
Like you're figuring everything out with them.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really neat.
It was definitely.
I got a question.
What's up?
Do you think the documentary was better with this kind of non-sequential information gathering, or do you think it would have been better for the audience to get the information in a more specific order?
I think because it was set up in a documentary form, you're kind of expecting the hectic, you're expecting the shaky camera, you're expecting the random information. If it was more dramatized, sequential would have worked a lot better, but I think this movie killed it with the documentary.
Yeah, I think going off of that, that style makes it so much more real, because that this is how it happened to them. This is a true story that they went through, and you're seeing it in the same way. So like Sierra said, if it had been sequenced and put in an easier format for us, it might have felt more like fake and less genuine.
No, that's a great point to bring up. It might have felt fake.
Yeah.
What about you, Schrag? What do you think about the whole documentary versus dramatized?
Well, it's always that with the documentary you get real emotion, real information, and I can't imagine this becoming a real movie besides a documentary. So I think it worked well. I think it worked well.
Yeah.
Even though I'd love to see a movie just following the grandfather.
Yeah.
With his experience. Obviously we can't, because we can't get his firsthand primary source, but it would be so interesting to see what he went through, because he came here with nothing and he built a little community for himself. He had his own grocery store, he built relationships with the community, and it was really cool.
He was beloved. I mean, people really.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was neat. Something I wanted to bring up was there were a lot of these really cool establishing shots throughout the film. That was kind of a lot of this, in between the scenes, they'd put these shots in. The one that stuck out to me was this really gorgeous shot of a sunset over a cotton field. And I just wondered what you guys thought about these transitioning shots and how they affected the film. If you guys had any thoughts on that.
I thought they were a really good touch, because it's different than obviously San Francisco, because San Francisco and Mississippi are two completely different places, and seeing the places that maybe their grandfather would have saw or the community would have saw, I feel really tied the movie together.
Yeah.
because it doesn't just serve as like a movie for us to watch. Like it's something that they could show Baldwin's daughter, who was with them the entire time, the little girl
Yeah.
that was just so excited for everything.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Mm-hmm. Schrag, comments?
Nothing really much besides what you said. You hit it off.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's the main cool thing. Yeah, it really ties you to the location you're at, pulls you into the film.
Mhm.
So, would we have any more general discussion items?
Oh,
Discuss?
the music, it was actually
Mhm.
Baldwin's music. Some of it was. He's a
That's cool.
hip hop artist. Only One is his hip hop name.
All right,
It,
that's
it
awesome.
was a song that played when they were in Chinatown, San Francisco. That was
Mhm.
his song.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I thought that
It was
was
good
funny.
music. So
Yeah.
I also noticed that, I don't know if this was his music, but like when they went to Mississippi, they played more like country music. So I thought that was cool too. That just even more like tied you to that location, that you
Mhm.
know it, immersed you into that setting.
The
Yeah.
final song was a very patriotic song for America too,
Yeah.
when they were kind of recapping everything that happened.
Right.
Mhm.
It kind of shows how they settled in America and they're finding so much out about how much this country actually did play in their family history.
Right. Even though there
Mhm.
were, downsides and difficulties, at the end of the day, it became their home, and they really are, Americans. So
Mhm.
it's really cool.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we'll hear from another sponsor, and then when we come back, we will dig a little deeper.
Man, now that November is over, I need to find a good razor to shave off this massive beard and stash I got growing. You know what I mean? But the thing is, I just can't find a good one. Handheld razors are just not that great. Electric razors nick my skin every now and again. I just don't know what to do. Wait, what's that? You say you know of a subscription for razors and other such cleanly products? Well, what is it? Dollar Shave Club? Oh, I think I've heard of them. Ah, you're so. How could I forget? They have quality razors that they ship to you every month, and replacements for the razors you already have, along with other cleaning objects, like soaps. Ah, how could I forget? They're voted very highly online for being the best razor subscription service in the United States. I don't know why I didn't order one sooner. Ah, that's right. Would you buy one if you had the money? Ah, that's a good answer. Because guess what? They're sponsoring this podcast. If you want to subscribe to Dollar Shave Club for 30% off your first month, go into the description of this podcast and use code Digging Deep to get 30% off. How's that sound? Yeah, I know that sounds good to you. Dollar Shave Club. It shaves.
All
Yeah.
right, and welcome back to Digging Deep. And it's time to dig just a little deeper into this documentary. So, Schrag, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. When I watched this movie, I was more looking for the camera work and stuff like that. The vlog style camera, I think, worked perfectly because it was a smaller documentary. It wasn't like an Discovery Channel or History Channel documentary with all sorts of graphics and on-scene shots. It was small, a very low budget in terms of filming, I'd say. I mean, flying costs, but this was with their phone or cameras and stuff like that. And I think it worked very well to contrast how big of a project this was overall. Like the smaller production compared to how big of an impact this trip had on the family, I think is very nice to see. What do you guys think about that?
I believe they mentioned that they originally just went down to Mississippi to see the gravestone of the grandfather. They had no intention of finding all of this information out, which I thought was so cool. Like, they got in contact with the right person at the right time, and bloomed the documentary.
Yeah, I think that's something to be said, that the story itself is so strong and so awesome that you don't need any fancy camera work or shots or anything. It's just, it stands by itself. So yeah.
I like throughout the movie too, it cut to old photographs instead of just the camera focused on the photographs. It cut to them in film. There were films towards the end, which I'll talk about a bit more. There was one computer graphic. No, I lied about that. There was one showing a map, like in the beginning when it was between China and San Francisco, which was interesting because it was so different from the rest of the movie. It was a bit weird, but I liked that. It showed a clear, like, this is what happened, because you can't easily like do that with just an iPhone.
Yeah,
so that's true.
And the one that was recording was Baldwin's wife, Larissa, the very acclaimed singer, songwriter, the whole list. Like, she was the one that was filming, and you heard her talking during the talking heads, which was another part that you wouldn't get in a dramatized film, like where they're just sitting down with steady camera talking directly to the camera. You can hear Larissa asking questions in the background.
And that really strengthened it a lot. Those like interviews with like the experts, we'll go into more into the history, but they were the ones that really solidified that history for the viewer.
And they had a wide variety of people they interviewed. Like, it wasn't just experts. Like, it was people within the Black community that knew the grandfather. It was the brothers. It was Charles, the heart of the movie, Charles.
Yeah, Charles. Yeah.
It all added a lot.
Something I wanted to talk about with the camera stuff was the shaky camera stuff, and kind of the point of view. I think a lot, like inside of the car, they would have just these short transitions where they would have like a really shaky camera being like, oh, we're in Mississippi. And like we were saying earlier, that really just lends to that kind of small feeling that this is just a really true, authentic story, and they're just taking a road trip and discovering stuff. It also is used during like emotional scenes, though. I don't know if you guys had any scenes where you thought that was really used well, the like shaky camera style.
When they visited where the grocery store was, the grandfather's grocery store. And they saw, it wasn't up anymore, but you could see the place where it was, and that was, you could tell Larissa was holding the camera and experiencing the emotions with everybody. And that was really cool.
That's a really cool aspect, because it really does make the viewer feel like you're experiencing those emotions too.
When do you guys want to take it away to one of your things?
We'll kind of jump into the scenes. So for the scene that I chose, it touches on the Chinese Exclusion Act and what Zach Schultz was saying before with the bound feet. Let's see if this will work. Let me bring this up. Hold on. So this is when they're in, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So this is when they're in the library learning about the family and like the documents that were taken legally. And this is the grandmother. And they just found her documents. And I thought the scene was really cool. And that's the great grandpa.
More of that shaky camera.
There we go. Yeah. So there is the Chinese woman with bound feet. There we go.
Yeah.
And this is what a lot of women would do to get into the US, because the Chinese Exclusion Act was more geared towards men coming into the US. So if a woman wanted to get into the US, there were some loopholes that they tried to do. And in the grandmother's documents, a lot of the questions centered around her bound feet, because like Zach Schultz was saying before, it shows signs of higher class. So that's what they would do to try to get into the US. And the Chinese Exclusion Act was something that they found had a very personal connection to them. Let's go back to here. So they found the documents where they had to register when they first came into the US, and if they didn't have the documents on them, if they were asked by somebody to prove that they belonged in the US, they would be in legal trouble, and it would take the testimony of a white man to say that they're okay.
Mhm.
But at the time, what white man really would have stuck up for them?
Right.
So
Yeah.
that scene, as you mentioned, had the shaky camera, but also had the cuts to the pictures, like Zach
Mhm.
also mentioned.
Mhm.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more interesting seeing, because I didn't know any of that history going into
Mhm.
this.
Mm-mm.
I think something cool is too, towards the end, they put out the years that the Chinese Exclusion Act like kind of faded out of existence.
Mhm.
I can't remember the exact dates, but it was like 1950 or something was when it like kind of ended, but there were still a lot of discriminations towards Chinese people. It
Yeah.
wasn't until like 2012 that it was like every member of the court said, yeah, that was a bad thing. So this is only like 10 years ago that we're actually saying, yeah, this was a shitty thing that the US did. So,
And it's
Mhm.
like 1950 isn't even that long ago.
yeah.
That's
No.
the sad part.
Mm-hmm. I think they said it was the only act that specifically banned a certain ethnicity from entering.
Because
Yeah.
there were acts in the past that excluded certain races, like there was
Jim Crow
for-
laws.
yeah, that was more for African Americans in the South, but then there was like they limited the amount of people from the Middle East and from Asia,
Right.
but they were never specified as much as the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Yeah, this was like
Yeah.
saying specifically, like, yeah, Chinese people are not allowed to enter the United States.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
pretty awful.
The US lost all their subtlety, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a tough time.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But it
And-
didn't stop a lot of Chinese immigrants from coming and opening these shops, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
a lot of the shops they would open when they would get here were grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the grandfather had. And
What was his shop called? It was Fancy Dining. Oh. it was a great name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what they would do. And the grandfather was here during the Great Depression, is when he had his store open. And if a lot of the people in the community, like we kept mentioning how they would interview people within the Black community who was around them, but all of them mentioned that if it wasn't for the grandfather extending their credit and giving them food, they don't know if they would have survived.
Right.
And
That was really cool. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's almost like these two minority groups were like, we're both hated. Why are we going to hate each other? And they just worked together to try to create a life for themselves down in the Delta.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any
Yeah.
comments on that, or you want to expand upon it?
One thing I found really cool was them talking about food, because they talked about food a lot, right? Because they're opening up these grocery stores. But one thing that the Black community said that they remembered about these Chinese Americans coming in was that they had a lot of their food. They shared it and kind of like made a unique food culture together. So like, make even like giving soy sauce and like using that and like all these different types of food. I thought that was really neat that was something that bonded the community together, and that they would eat together and they would have these community dinners because they felt more comfortable with each other than with the white people that were living there at the time.
In literature, when food is mentioned, whether it's a meal or it's just food being brought into like a conversation or a scene, it's always a motif for like unity and fellowship. And that is just a perfect example of why that is such a a symbolic thing in literature. Like food just brings people together. Everyone has to eat, so why not make something good?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Down in Mississippi, the mayor of Pace, one of the towns they went to, actually was an African American man, and he, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he knew the grandfather. If he didn't, he knew multiple accounts, and they talked to many people.
I think he mentioned that, like, because anyone alive knew him like as a child. Like they remember being a kid and like going to his grocery store.
Yeah.
Well, who was the person? There was one person that they said that the grandfather drove home.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, but I don't remember who.
I can't remember who it was, but
I'm pretty sure that was Happy.
It might have been Happy.
It might have been, yeah.
Of him with his car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the grandfather was just a sweet guy, and like when he got stuck at the store, he would drive the kid home, and there's another way that he really impacted the community.
Don't forget about the letters that they found. I believe Happy gave them to them, but where the grandfather mentioned, "I would do anything to see my kids right now." And when Charles read that struck a chord in my heart, and I know it definitely had to for you guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was one of those scenes where you really felt Charles's, journey and growth.
It was
throughout
like
this.
One of the first times he saw physical proof that his dad did love him, even across the world. Like he was still thinking about him, and he still wanted to be part of his life.
Yeah. So something about the Chinese Exclusion Act I wanted to ask you guys, because that was a really cool big part of it. How do you think that affected not only Charles, but a lot of these Chinese Americans, Charles's dad and the kids, for their feeling of being able to be American, in the country?
Yeah, that definitely relates to the whole idea of identity. Like, even with the Chinese Exclusion Act, would they ever feel like they were accepted?
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like at the time, definitely not. Like the grandfather, I don't think he felt accepted. But now with like Baldwin and Edwin and this generation, it's definitely changed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think what's interesting is the Charles's generation, because he lived there almost his whole life, but I still don't think he felt fully like an American. I still think he felt like he wasn't fully welcome, that he still felt more Chinese traditionally than American, which is sad, because I think the Chinese Exclusion Act and all those things really affected him and caused him to not feel welcome.
That's a great point to bring up, definitely.
Yeah.
Schultz, any comments? Anything you'd like to elaborate or add on to this?
I think what you said is right, but even then, Baldwin and Edwin were bullied in school, so it was still a struggle for them. But I think it has gotten way, way better. So,
and there's still a lot more progress that could be made.
Yeah,
it doesn't just stop at the U.S. government unanimously saying like, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. Like, there's more that could be done, should be done, and hopefully will be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But that's all I got to add to that.
All right, Schultz, do you want to talk about your scene?
Yeah, let's move into that. So
let me pull that up for you while you begin.
Go for it. So my scene was pretty early in the movie. It was kind of the first time that they found a piece of evidence tied to his grandfather. And again, like we said before, it was kind of by luck, high happenstance, that they happened upon this document. So here they are, and she just happens to be like, oh, they're telling him the grandfather's name, and she's like, follow me. And so she gets out this document. And again, there's that shaky camera used there, and you can pause it when it gets onto the book. They'll do a zoom in on it. There it is. So this is they find his Bible, and it's just this really cool moment where you can feel the excitement in the room, with the camera styles and everything. It's just perfect for like starting off their journey And then if you play it and keep going for a second, it shows Charles's reaction to this. Yeah, there it is.
So excited.
Yeah, he was. It was just pure joy and like sadness at the same time, and it just ties into how Charles thought that he felt so severed from his father, like he didn't know him. He thought that his father didn't care about him. He just felt like not only did he not have a father there, that he didn't have one at all. And I think it's really this scene where you see that he's starting to realize that, okay, this person exists. I don't know what my connection to him is, but that's what I'm gonna find out. So it's more of those close-up zooms that really show the emotion on these characters. I don't know if you guys had anything you noticed in that scene or similar scenes where they're exploring that kind of thing, but that really stuck out to me in the film.
I think the fact that they found a Bible really emphasized the whole idea of how much Charles had in connection with his father. Like, Charles was the one that mentioned going to church and just crying at the mention of a heavenly father, and
Right.
seeing a religious book that belonged to his father definitely played a role in the whole emotion that he went through.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of ties into that scene we talked about earlier where he mentions the story at church. Because I think there is an interesting aspect where almost the religion ties into like his missing his father, or at least reminds him of that missing his father. Yeah. I also think that this is the first scene where Charles starts to open up to his family, because that was a huge thing in the beginning, that like the kids didn't even know that their grandfather lived in the US. They definitely didn't know that he died in Mississippi until they happened to find this picture of his gravestone. And they were like, "Dad, what is this?" And he was like, "Oh, just a picture." Because he was so like sheltering that in. He was so holding that in from them. And this is really that part where he starts to open up and like we've said before, connect with his kids and start to reconcile with missing his father.
Charles knew pretty much the same amount of information that the kids knew. Like, he didn't know much about his dad. And when we get into Schultz's scene, it'll go in a little deeper, but like you mentioned, with finding all this information, it did open him up a lot more. And I think that's a great segue into start to talk about Schultz. Unless you have something else to mention. Did you want to say something else?
I think that's perfect.
All right, so then I will pull up that. Zach Schultz, if you want to start talking about your scene.
Yeah. My scene was towards the end when they came home from finding out this information, and Charles pulled out old film reels that belonged to his mother that he had never seen before. And it's interesting because he'd never seen them before. He doesn't know what was on them. And if he had just looked at them, he would have known that his father did care for him. But I like this scene because it was the dark room, symbolized Charles's feelings towards his father. It was dark. He didn't know anything. It was in the dark. And the film was really the shining light on, he did love me. I did have a father. He was with me. But he just never looked at it because it was a sore memory. He didn't think about it all that much. And I thought it was very interesting. I liked the filming of it. I mean, you can't really have a projector in daylight or in light in general, but I liked the symbolism behind it.
No, I love your interpretation of it, because they didn't have to show them watching the films. They could have just shown them like they have on the screen right now. But the fact that there was the dark room and the projector was the light, like, I think that's a beautiful interpretation of what happened.
I like that we picked the scenes we did because they really do perfectly tie in. Like, mine is the start of Charles realizing and starting to open up, and yours is like where he's like, okay, I'm ready to like fully explore this.
Yeah.
It was a good plot line for the documentary, even though it was hectic within the middle. The opening was strong and the closing was strong, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is there anything else?
Final opinions. I thought it was a great documentary. I really enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching it too. I didn't know what to expect going into it, but it was good. When I saw a documentary, I just thought, well, it's going to be a history of something, but no, it was a more personal family story, and I was pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah, I loved how personal it was. Like, it didn't just follow a time in history. It was very specific. And I think that really added to the whole emotional aspect of it.
Yeah. It was a great watch. I really enjoyed it too. It was very very emotional and really brought you into the family story. I did a good job of that.
And it expressed the themes of identity and the idea of the other very well too.
Yeah. Right, because it was about, Charles and the kids and the whole family really just tackling this issue of identity in America as a different ethnicity without growing up with a father, whatever is limiting you, still just going past that and how that affects you for your whole life.
Yeah, seeing Charles kind of progress throughout the movie, his character progress, like we were mentioning before, how he was very sheltered, and then he finally opens up and shows these films. It was great to watch.
Yeah.
Really sweet movie.
Yeah.
All right. Well, shall we conclude?
I believe
Let's
so.
do it.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll see you next time on Dig Deep, and we'll be discussing the really thought-provoking movie Real Steel. So I'm really excited for that.
Love Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman was great in this one.
Hugh Jackman's fantastic. So please make sure to visit us tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And we were really glad to have you here on Dig Deep.
And remember, keep those shovels close by. We'll be digging soon enough.
All right. See ya.